Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. My guests today have had their lives totally transformed because of peak oil. You'll hear about it in a few minutes, but first, energy news with Rick.
Thanks, Janaea. Our lead article today was reported by Knight Ridder on March 16th. The Cantarell oil field in Mexico was peaked according to leaked internal Pemex memo. The initial rate of decline is estimated to be at least 6% annually and may increase over the next few years. Cantarell is second only to Ghawar in Saudi Arabia, which is considered the largest oil field in the world. Some sources think that Ghawar is also peaking or very close to peak. Matthew Simmons has stated that when Ghawar peaks, the world has peaked. Coming just after the recent news that the giant Bergen oil field in Kuwait peaked, this news emphasizes just how dependent this country is on foreign oil and increasingly oil from Saudi Arabia and other OPEC nations. It is likely that as a result of Cantarell peaking, Mexico will not be able to provide the U.S. with as much oil as in the past. It would be difficult to impossible for Pemex to make up for the loss of production. This will likely cause an increase in pump prices for gas here as we look for more oil imports from the Mideast and elsewhere that will come at higher and higher prices. On March 27th, the Sacramento Bee reported that gas prices in the area had jumped nearly 15 cents a gallon in just 2 weeks. Current prices are 40 cents over prices here a year ago. Things could be worse. Gas in Honolulu is $2.80 a gallon and $2.70 a gallon in San Diego. If gas prices continue to rise at the 40-cent a year rate, it's obvious that $4 and $5 a gallon gas isn't too many years off, and that's if we're lucky. Oh, did I mention that the hurricane season this year starts in only a few months? Will terrorists succeed in an attempt to disrupt Saudi Arabia's oil delivery system again this year? Will we invade or bomb Iran this year and stop their oil exports? It's clear that we are getting closer to peak oil, and there are many factors that can affect the price we pay for gas at the pump. The only way to resolve this is to reduce our addiction to oil now before it's too expensive and too late. In solar news, on March 20th, the California Public Utilities Commission had received applications for solar rebates for their Million Solar Rooftops program that total 91 megawatts. This will trigger a reduction in the rebates from $2.80 per kilowatt to $2.50 per kilowatt at the point when installations actually reach the 50 megawatt threshold for the higher rebates. This is an annual threshold, so if you plan to install a solar system, you could wait until next year to get the higher rebate, but you may risk paying more for the solar panels as demand continues to increase. This is a little bad news for those eager to install solar systems, but a clear indicator that people are getting the message about alternative energy and ready to embrace renewable energy systems that reduce our need for natural gas and coal and also help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In food news, this somewhat odd report from Reuters, a report that Walmart will be doubling their offerings of organic food. Seems that Walmart is the #1 seller of organic milk and wants to continue to cash in on the organic food business. So they're going to start to sell an even greater variety of organic food products. And this should happen over the next few months. Should you buy organic food at Walmart? Although Peak Moment News remains neutral on these issues, Walmart has been criticized in the press for various issues. It's up to you to decide where to shop. The Reuters article continued to say that Walmart doesn't want to profit more from organic food sales, but is focused on absolute sales. So, if you do happen to shop for organic food at Walmart, try to resist adding that big screen TV to your shopping cart on the way to the checkout stand. Moving north, from MSNBC, discovered on March 2nd, an oil spill on the Alaska pipeline is reported the largest ever on the North Slope. Up to an estimated 267,000 gallons of crude oil spilled onto the tundra near a lake. Workers working in 70-degree below zero wind chill attempted to build a snow and ice dam around the oil to protect the lake. It will take about 2 weeks to repair the quarter-inch leak caused by internal corrosion. No estimates of how long it will take to clean up the spill were given due to the extreme cold working conditions. There have been numerous reports of failures and maintenance issues with the Alaska pipeline for the past 30 years. The pipeline's almost 30 years old now. Critics point out that there is increasing risk of leaks and malfunctions that will cause significant harm to the fragile environment there, and that doesn't even consider terrorist attacks. In other Alaska-related news, the Environmental News Service reported on March 17th that the Senate approved yet another budget bill that would allow drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This will eventually create a showdown in the House where there are more opponents to drilling there. Peak Moment News will keep you informed on this issue as more develop. That's the news for now, so back to Janaea and her guests tonight.
Thanks, Rick. Boy, things aren't sitting still, are they? My guests today, I'm happy to introduce sisters Loretta O'Brien and Karen O'Brien. Thanks for being with us here today. From what I understand, you two have been on quite an adventure since you got aware of peak oil. So tell us your story. What led to learning about peak oil, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I'll start. Karen gave me Barbara Kingsolver's book, Small Wonder, about 2 years ago. And I started reading, and it's actually a book of essays talking about sustainable living. And it just triggered, from one book to the other. And then I then began reading This Organic Life by Joan Dyer-Gusseau, which, interestingly enough, one day I woke up and I thought, gee, I wonder how much more oil we have, and I didn't know.
So those books talk about
they
those
don't.
topics?
They're not really. These books mostly are talking about, food sources, sustainable living, consuming less. Both of those. Joan, actually, her book is all about becoming a suburban farmer, and so she grows all her own food, and I was very inspired by that book. So and she also makes references to the cost of shipping food all over the country, and makes the comment that it takes approximately 450 calories of energy to ship 1 calorie, those types of things. And so I moved on with that to actually find out, where are we on the oil situation on the planet? I had sort of had it in the back of my mind that we would run out of oil within our lifetime, and so I wanted to find out where we were. And so I just started searching, and eventually I came upon the Solar Living Institute, and one of their books by Matt Savinar had just been published online, and I began reading Matt Savinar's book.
What was the book title?
Matt Savinar's book is The End. I think it's the Oil Age is Over. And it is now obviously been published, but at the time it was an online book, so we printed it out and read it. And Matt Savinar painted a very dismal picture of something called peak oil, and what it will likely result for us as a planet, our economies, food, just about everything. And I immediately called Karen. I said, you must read this book. And so we went from there to...
So just give me a sense. So you read, Karen, you read the book as well?
Yes.
Yes. So
right.
what hit you about that book? I mean, that was your wake-up book on peak oil for both of you. What did you find yourself talking about from what Matt's picture was?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was, back to Barbara Kingsolver for a minute, that book was actually apparently written as her response to 9/11. So we were sort of, the world was sort of alert at that time. And so when Loretta called and says, I'm emailing, this thing to you, you have to read it. And of course I had, my 6-year-old daughter, and 5 at the time, and all this was going on. It took me a few days to actually, have the courage, because I could tell by the tone of her voice that this was very urgent, that it had to do with some major changes coming about. So when May 8th, 2004, I sat down with this book, and it was sort of like reading it and not being able to breathe at the beginning for me. And lots of things racing through your mind about, your family, the economy, all the things that Loretta mentioned. How soon? When's it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Could this be true?
What was he picturing? Tell us what you imagined or what he was describing. That the end of oil. I mean, the end of the oil age. What? Not it doesn't make blood and gore. But I mean, what is it you were? What was?
Well, Matt's book was really very comprehensive, And he did a very, very good job of outlining how dependent our entire lifestyle here, and in fact the entire planet, is on what we now know is cheap oil. And at the end of cheap oil, there are going to be some consequences to our lifestyle. And he paints a very dismal picture very quickly that without cheap oil, there is a potential for food shortages. There is obviously transportation issues. But even more importantly, that everything that we have and that we have in our homes and our automobiles and everything is so dependent on either products or manufactured products from oil. So our toothbrushes and all those silly things that we think we've become so used to. So it was very, very comprehensive. So all at once, it just hit us more or less like a ton of bricks that everything could change. And at that particular moment, it appeared to me it was going to change quite quickly.
So you were ready for imminent world collapse. Or,
we were. In fact, we were. Yeah.
So where did you go from there? I mean, obviously, it hasn't collapsed. It's been 2 years here. But you've obviously. Where did you go from that information? Yeah. Did other books and so on? Conversations.
Well, Loretta is a researcher, and so she kind of went in that direction. And having a daughter, I thought, how am I going to have this lifestyle change? Because I knew we were going to have to change it. So I went to more books on, okay, how do you get to this sustainable life, and how do you handle it emotionally, and how do you have a balance, and how do you, all those things at the same time, sort of literally recovering as if you'd been just kind of floored, deer in the headlights sort of thing. So, so I went to that sort of thing in terms of the book. So one of the things that I read, one of the first ones I read was Creating a Life Together, because I thought, if we were going to be doing this, we had to do it with people, the tribe kind of a thing. Who was going to be our tribe? And so we thought, well, this can't be that easy. So I read this book, which is written by the editor of a community magazine, and it's all about intentional living, eco-villages, and that sort of thing. So I found out very quickly that this was going to be a lot harder than, just sort of let's all get together and, work on this. So in the meantime, Loretta is reading much more of the technical things, and we really felt that we needed to educate ourselves very quickly and educate the people that we cared about quickly. So she was kind of on that path, and we almost sort of got to, because at that point we had gone to the Solar Living Institute to take the permaculture course.
Pause. Solar Living Institute in
Hopland,
near Ukiah in California, and you took a class on
permaculture and biointensive gardening, and Eileen, our mother, the three of us sat there in this hotel room thinking about how much land do we need, who's going to, it was just sort of one of those things. So we actually had our stack of books. My husband immediately went out and bought $400 of books on, this kind of life. And so we just collected our books, and you think we have a lot of books here. And we started dividing them up in a sense and reading different things and passing them around. And Loretta kept sort of on the track of the technical aspect of what peak oil is actually doing. And then I was kind of going into, how do we handle this sort of emotionally, spiritually, family life. And then Eileen has already been a gardener for years and years, so she was very much trying to move us in that direction. So we sort of divided it up at that point. But
that's probably
bouncing back to you, we know some of your track. What did you move to after you read Matt Safinar? What spoke to you next?
Karen says I moved on to the technical part. Actually, really wasn't an intellectual pursuit for its own sake. I was really looking for the book that said it wasn't true. And so I moved then to Richard Heinberg's books, The Party's Over and Power Down. And those two were, if I would recommend, if you're not going to read anything, read those two. Richard Heinberg is obviously a pillar in this community with regard to the idea of sustainable living and quote, powering down. But once I read both of his books, I realized that there
There was
yeah, we were here. And
Yeah.
you know, and I even sort of tried to read some stuff by Colin Campbell, and you know, looked online, ASPO, the Association for the Study of Peak Oil, and I visit those places periodically, and energybulletin.net, for, you know, not that I really understand them necessarily, but I'm still looking for you know, so that's kind of why I continued doing
And so
that.
part of what you saw with Richard Heinberg then is he didn't say there's a way out.
No,
Right.
he actually said that our way out is building sustainable communities, relocalizing our economies, all of our products, food sources and water and everything. So really essentially building, as he says, lifeboats.
Lifeboats.
Yeah.
Right. So part of what you were doing is starting to prepare for how do you build your lifeboats, right?
Right.
To include your families.
Exactly.
What other kinds of sources did you find that you turned to, both for information or with your families, other books?
Well, I went to Just the Greatest Life because it was suburban/urban people moving into this direction, and you know, already being in a rural community, I looked at, you know, what our well situation was.
Let's pause for a minute. You're in Nevada City area, is that right?
Right,
You were
right.
already here in the Nevada
Right.
City area. We should stop and introduce this. And you, Loretta, are on the coast,
coast,
near
yeah.
Half Moon Bay. So neither of you are in the midst of dense urban communities.
Right.
Right. So go ahead.
yeah.
So you already were in a semi-rural community.
Semi-rural, right. But basically living in my own, because we grew up in suburbia, living in just a more beautiful suburban kind of lifestyle. And so, but the real shift to, you know, raising animals, growing food, dealing with water sources, all that sort of thing. And so that book was really comforting because it was funny and it was insightful about how you learn from these things, you know, on a physical level.
Remind me of the book. Which book?
Just the Greatest Life.
Okay,
And
Just the Greatest Life. Who wrote that?
And that is David Schaefer, and he has been featured in Mother Earth News a few times with his family. You know, they had the sheep and the goats and all the things. And so that was sort of like, okay, I know I have to shift because, you know, all of this research is telling me. And so that I went in that direction, and then Navigating the Tides of Change came along.
So this is another book.
And that's another book by David LaChapelle. And that was helpful to me because, again, it's about change, and the change is inevitable. And how do I do this in a way that I don't collapse as a mother, primarily? And how do we, you know, continue to literally ride this wave, knowing that there's going to be something, whether it's in my lifetime or my daughter, she's going to need to have the strength, the ability to you know, think creatively, think green, and what does that mean? You know, how do we do that? So I went to that book, and you know, the theory of chaos, and how chaos, you know, it starts looking like it's in order, and then it sort of becomes this, you know, swooping, you know, cloud, and then what happens when it starts to settle. And I realized that there had to be something that I could hold on to that would help me to settle when, you know, this thing either hits or lands or whatever it is. Nobody knows what it's going to look like. It is uncharted territory, and nobody knows. And that was the thing. There's no model. There's no one to whom we can go. And it was sort of like all of us need to do our own searching to come up with a way to, you know, keep our feet on the ground and keep moving in support of, you know, each other. But we each have to know. And that's what I thought. How am I going to do this? How am I going to stay centered?
Did that book help you do that?
It did.
That sounds like a gem.
It is.
A must read. Say the title again.
Navigating the Tides of Change.
Navigating the Tides of Change.
And one of the things I'll just kind of add in that is that an image that I had early on was, you know, if you go to sort of like the Victorian Christmas or Mardi Gras or something, and there's just crowds of people, and pretend they're all walking one way, and you're saying, no, we need to go that way. And what that feels like to have the entire crowd going this way and you're walking against that. And then he has a chapter on what the salmon feels like going upstream, and it's going home. And there's a certain homeness about all of this. It's kind of ironic that you sort of find yourself as you're reading these things, there's a certain relief almost that we get to get rid of all the stuff, you know, that we've been told is important, and getting back to the place of connecting, with the earth and each other and all the things that we've been told are important, but this is,
But our culture isn't doing at this time. I
culture's not
mean, it's
doing.
part of the alienation and the separation that we're all feeling is because we're disconnected.
Absolutely.
As someone reminded us, we're disconnected from the earth. In the suburbs, you have no idea where the water comes from that you're drinking. You have no idea where the sewage is going. The wood that's in your house probably wasn't local. I mean, everything is, we are disconnected from everything. So I love your image, his image of coming home back to some center that we'll recognize when we're there. It's like a familiarity, perhaps. It's a nice gem. So then where did, okay, I'm going to bounce the ball back here, Loretta. Okay, she's checking in on getting centered at home. What's happening for you?
I'm over here. Well, I just sort of looked at, when my husband and I, we still talk about, should we stay or should we go? We don't have 40 acres. We have a 6,000 square foot lot. And, I was ready to, check the whole thing and like, we gotta go now. And he's like, no, let's just hang out here for a while. So we started planting and I just thought, well, we just planted our whole backyard that summer in vegetables. And it was interesting that Karen was talking about coming home and feeling reconnected. It's actually sort of a joke. We would call up each other, and I said, you know what? Our O'Brien ancestors are up there just rolling their eyes. They have to be, because only 150 years have passed, and we don't really know what a potato plant looks like. And so, we had these. We sure do now. And we know how to dig them and everything. But those types of, reconnecting, and even squash plants, and the odd time that you have to help, them with your little paintbrush, and we're out there pollinating our squash plants, and all these things that we never experienced living in the suburbs, because after all food came from the grocery store, and actually like Karen said, for the very first time, actually feeling like you really are part, of the planet, and as opposed to just sort of occupying it. So that's kind of what I started doing, and then also really focusing on biointensive gardening, because I have such a small space, and so we took a couple of workshops with that. And my poor husband, every Saturday morning, how many more boxes does he have to build today? And eventually we ran out. So that's pretty much what we did. The first year, and we've got our plan to now do the front yard and those types of things. Where we came up with the idea that suburbia has to survive to a certain extent. Obviously, it's not going to be functioning the way it is right now, but everybody has 60 by 100 lots, and everybody can grow 1,000 square feet of vegetables and fruits, which is a significant amount that obviously won't pull on the general food bank, if you will. And there's a certain amount of independence that you feel, and self-sufficiency with that. We've already started developing our community with our neighbors, because we didn't know how much to plant. We always overplanted things like beans and squash. So we've actually started kind of building our little post-carbon community within the suburbs, and that's kind of how we moved with that. So I don't know.
In our last several minutes here, are there any of the other things any other resources, books that you read along the way that you want to make sure that we hadn't, that were important, really important to you?
In terms of discovery, I really enjoyed, and I really wasn't enjoyed, but I was really moved by One with Nineveh by Paul and Ann.
Say it again?
One with Nineveh.
One with Nineveh.
By Paul and Ann Ehrlich, and they're also very well-known scientists. They've been studying and writing about sustainability, global sustainability with regard to agriculture, resources, pollution for decades. And they had a unique way in that particular book for me to putting all the pieces together, and also really helping you with the idea of what you do and how it really can impact the planet, and especially as Americans, when we consume so much. They were really instrumental in me sort of deciding that as best I could, I would try to they talk about energy slaves, so to speak, of releasing the slaves and freeing the energy slaves that work for me personally. And so I was very moved by that book as well. So.
About
I
30
want
seconds. About 30 seconds.
add Limits to Growth was really great because they talk about overshoot, and really to think that the rest of our lives, peak oil notwithstanding, we will be kind of pulling back from having overshot. And to be able to sort of go to these books and see how critical it is, but then go to other things and other resources. And so we sort of would read, and then we couldn't read any more about that stuff, and then we would go to the garden. So
it sounds like you sort of were balancing it for yourselves to have,
Right,
so much information, or so you wouldn't be overwhelmed, and then go back and get grounded again in the gardens and life-affirming things with your hands and your grounding. Oh, what an adventure! I feel, and you're still, of course, you're still in it and sharing with it.
Exactly.
So. Any last little thoughts here?
See if we have any. Well, for me, just to look out into the media and see things that, even Texaco or Chevron, I guess, has some ads now. Right. And just to know that, it's kind of affirming, and at the same time, it's like, oh no, it is real, but to know that we're not the only ones, that there's lots of resources, it's actually happening, and, we can...
In a sense, we're not alone. I mean, I hear you, is that it's just even in this last year, the affirmations, the news, right. It's hitting more on the radar screen. Right. I mean, when Bush, in his State of the Union address, says we're addicted to oil, then there's going to be, it's reached a certain threshold of awareness. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This next week's Time magazine is actually about global climate change. It's going to draw more attention to the factors in overshoot. Mm-hmm. So
we just want to say too, what you're doing is critically important. So
which is?
This sort of thing, Apple, all the things that you're doing, I mean, it's really very supportive. So
we're in this together here to help awaken each other and hold each other's hands. And that's part of what I hear you were doing for each other, that we all need to do, to say, we can find a way through uncharted territory and pull together the most creative ideas we have. So I want to thank you both for being my guests.
Thank you.
And I want to let you know that I want to invite our guests to be back for Peak Moment, Community Responses to a Changing Energy Future. Our episode next week will be part 2 with the O'Brien sisters, and we'll take a look at women's responses and family responses to a changing energy future.